Hi, Dr. Megan Ford from the University of Georgia's Love and Money Center, back with another author talk. I'm so excited to have our guest here today, Khara Croswaite-Brindle, author of many books, honestly. But today we're going to be talking about a really fun one, which is your Enneagram and money and transforming Enneagram edges into financial freedom. So, Khara, welcome. Thank you so much for being here, for your time today. You have a co-author too that I want to just shout out, and that's Hannah DeGroot. So I am excited to dive in and talk a little bit more about Enneagram. This is something that folks may or may not know about. So I'm just curious to kick things off. What inspired you to write this particular book about Enneagram and about kind of its intersection with money?
Yeah, thank you, Megan. This book was an inspiration because the Enneagram is a personality test, but it's relational, right? So when we think about having a relationship with money, it kind of was my inspiration of like, what is the framework or another framework we can look at money through? So back when I was thinking about this, I was having a conversation with a colleague at a working retreat. I put a little blog together, threw it out to my community, and got lots of responses. So yeah, this makes sense. And that kind of was the catalyst to saying, hey, I want to write a book on the topic because as a financial therapist, of course, I want to bridge some of those things. So Hannah, I reached out to her through social media and was like, hey, you don't know me, but I need you because you're an Enneagram coach. And at that point, I wasn't fully trained in the Enneagram,
Ah,
although I've loved it for about 2 decades. And I said, can I talk to you about writing a book? And so she jumped on the call, which I was so grateful that she didn't think I was some sort of, I don't know, scam coming at her like, hey, give me money to write a book. And we had it written in about 5 months because we're both Enneagram threes for listeners who are familiar with the Enneagrams. Like,
okay.
get stuff done pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And here we are with an amazing book that hopefully just gives another lens of which to look at our money behavior. So spending, saving, investing, and giving at this point.
Yeah. Okay. It's so funny that you are a three. I am also a three.
I
Un-
already had that clocked for you, actually.
Unsurprisingly. Unsurprisingly, probably. But when I cracked open that section for threes, I tell you, I had to take deep breaths
Oh,
because
mhm.
it was so resonant to my experience, and I was kind of like, ooh, yikes. So I think this, like you said, this Enneagram kind of framework is just another way to view our personality or maybe some of our tendencies around our relationship with money. And there are plenty of frameworks, I think, out there, some popular ones, but you kind of also integrate some of those things throughout the book, including things like money scripts and in what Enneagram those might show up or
Yep.
what those might have a tendency to be because of your Enneagram number. So I don't know, maybe talk a little bit about that and how you kind of arrived at, you know, Enneagram specifically. Like, how can we elevate our knowledge by knowing more about our Enneagram?
Yeah. So even though it's a personality test, I consider it that relational tool, as I mentioned. And so people, I think instead of saying, hey, this is stereotyping you into a box, a lot of Enneagram folks would say, this is just showing you the box you're already in. And so your reaction to the book, I really appreciate that sharing because that is exactly what we expect when people, when we get it right, quote unquote. Because the Enneagram edges are the things we want to work on, right? Kind of our growth edges, things that we're like, oh, I don't really want people to know this, or I'm hiding this. And so even when we just look at the 9 types on the Enneagram, if you do a training, most often you have like a gut punch when you get to your type of like, that feels like I'm being called out. That feels like shame. And so we had to be really careful in this book to not reinforce shame because that's, of course, against every principle of financial therapy. But we also wanted people to feel seen, right? And so I appreciated that you shared that. How it came about this book is we interviewed a bunch of folks that self-identified as under earners, which might include various professions. I work with therapists, so of course they showed up
Yeah.
in
Notorious.
solidarity. And so we went and said, hey, if you know your Enneagram type, we have, a series of questions for you. And from that, we just asked some questions of like, what is happening with your money right now? Like, what is your relationship? What are your emotions related to money? And maybe not interesting to anyone who's an Enneagram nerd, but like our twos and threes showed up first. They're like, I will happily help you with this project. But
Shocker.
then our sixes and our sevens, sixes being very anxious, sevens being very playful and energetic and out there in the world, they were the hardest to like anchor down in those interviews because of their own reasons, right? Trepidation for sixes and sevens were out doing fun, exciting things and didn't have time, right? So it took me a minute and Hannah a minute to find those folks, but that really helped us flush out our hypothesis, if you will. I'm an
Hmm.
amateur researcher. I'm not a research person, but I had this like hypothesis of what each type might show up with their money. And so, long story short, where I needed Hannah, she's actually done the deep dive in Enneagram to the subtypes. So there's actually 27 Enneagram types, not the nine that most people see in like surface level Enneagram work. And so I needed her to help me put language to, okay, why do we see one person who's like a four, who's considered an individualist, artistic human? Why do we see some of those folks really lean into money and buy beautiful, unique items off Etsy? And then this other group of fours who are like, shun money. I don't want anything to do with money. I reject it. And so I needed her to help me figure out why that was showing up with the subtypes, which was really interesting. From there, I, of course, integrated a bunch of, I think, 23 financial therapy tools because I couldn't help myself. And I love that you brought up the money scripts because I think everyone who's heard my on other podcasts have heard this before, but like the 4 money scripts that exist or existed before this book still have an anxiety through thread. All 4 of them are still anxious presenting. And so, although it was
Hmm.
helpful for me in my own money journey to get those scripts and have that language, I was like, where am I headed though? I don't want to be money vigilant. I don't want to be money status. I don't want to
Hmm.
be money worship. And so, for my own client work, I decided to come up with 3 more money scripts that I call the quote unquote healthy money scripts.
Hmm.
And this book debuts those. And so, that's really fun to have here as well.
Yeah, I love those. You're right. There is an anxious through thread in those existing kind of money scripts and a way to having a more positive frame on a money script, I think is definitely needed, especially if we're talking about kind of the next steps towards improving our relationship with money or maybe healing that relationship in some ways. Something to anchor to that feels a little bit less pejorative, more positive and
That's right.
hopeful.
And that's what I heard last week from someone. He actually had, Dr. Klontz on his podcast around
Mhm.
this topic. And he came in and asked me some questions about Enneagram. And I was like, oh, yeah. And here are these 3 other scripts. And he was like, I am so happy I met you. I feel hopeful now. Because that was what he was missing from the 4 other scripts was like, I feel no hope. It was like matter of fact, this is who you are. There's no transformation.
Mm.
And that's defeating for a lot of us. We're like, I don't want anxiety or, money feeling like it's controlling me to be
Mhm.
my experience. And so I was
Right.
like, we got to come up with something else. And even in that, I talk about being like an arc, like our money avoidant folk is not going to land in all 3 of the healthy scripts. They're probably going to start with like the most simple of the healthy scripts. And so I see a lot of bell curves in my head when I talk
Uh-huh.
about this of like majority of folks land in the middle, but then we have these like folks on the outsides.
Right.
And so hopefully that just resonates with people that they do in fact feel hopeful because once I have them identify the script they want, then it's like, what are the measurable steps in financial
Mhm.
therapy to make that happen? So the book just starts that conversation for people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. What a resource for people to kind of ease in to learning a little bit more about themselves, about some of their natural tendencies around these things. A way to holding up a mirror
Yeah,
to sort of see, okay, yeah, that does seem like me, and here's some language that I can use to frame that. Here's how I can better understand myself. You talked about it as a relational kind of frame too. Like, how can others in my life also understand me in this context?
exactly.
I think
Exactly.
about, work with couples and family work as well as a CFT, as an MFT, and a certified financial therapist. Like that always a lot of the framing or frameworks around money personalities feel quite individualized. And I think the misstep or maybe the gap then is how do we apply this in relational context or how do we understand this better in systems kind of thinking. So I love that this embraces also kind of a who am I in relationship to other people.
Very much so. I think of our beloved colleague, Rick Kaler, who loves the Enneagram because he came on and he was like, Kara, I've given your book to all my couples. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. Right. Like, so flattered. And he's like, but he knows, and you've echoed this too, he knows the Enneagram is a tool of empathy. Like it helps us understand other people's way of being, right? Not as a stereotype, but just like some curiosity and again, some language. And so when we're like, okay, here's a person who identifies as an Enneagram 6 and how they show up with money in such contrast to a 2, now we can create some dialogue and some empathy around, okay, I don't have to I don't know, agree with what you do, but I have some understanding of what you're doing. And so having people pick up this book and say, let me look at this, not just for myself, but a loved one or a family member or a business partner, even like that could help a lot of different relationships, I suspect.
100%. 100%. I think, yeah, there's no higher compliment than Rick Kaler giving your book to all of the couples that he sees
Yeah.
in their books with. That's a big compliment for sure.
Yeah. Very flattered. Very flattered.
Which just shows how useful it is for people to kind of grasp on to something. We're already kind of talking a little bit about some of the key things that you'll find between these pages and maybe some of the key takeaways from your Enneagram and Money. But is there anything else that people would find that might feel important or kind of, just like the key points here?
Yeah. So outside of the healthy money scripts, we tried to weave in stories throughout each of the 9 types. So we did go into subtypes, and Hannah, of course, fleshed that out as her expertise. But my favorite part was writing the stories, and that really illustrated okay, here's the money behavior, whether we're talking savings, spending, hoarding, or talking investing or giving. And so we had these stories, like the little short vignettes, if you will, in the book that just like highlighted okay, here's how this particular Enneagram type might show up with their money. And I think those stories make it more human of like, oh, do I see myself in this character's story? All of which were inspired by either my client work, de identified, or like a hodgepodge of people that we interviewed. And I think that really brought it to life because we don't want to talk at people. We wanted to talk with people of like, do you see yourself on these pages? Do they have the gut punch like you did of like, oh, like I feel so seen, best or worst
Mhm.
way?
Yeah.
And so those stories matched with here are all these tools to help you heal. We loved to match up. Here's a tool that we think would be most compatible with each Enneagram type. So the best tool for a 2 is going to look very different from that 6 as just examples because I have a lot of 2s and 6s in my life right now. A lot of therapists are 2s, no surprise. They're helpers. And so just giving them a strategy that might feel compatible or bite size made it more possible for them to say, okay, I'm going to move the needle forward on my money healing journey. We're not looking for big, drastic changes, but maybe just something that they're like, yeah, that's tolerable. I can do that, especially if it felt compatible. It felt, not one size fits all, which is what a lot of our money books say. Like, every human do this thing. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, okay, if you're 2, do this. And if you're 4, do this. And if you're 9, do this. But I think
Yeah.
people appreciated that if they just even went to their chapter to start.
Yeah. Something a bit more individualized, I think, can always be really useful. You're right. There is sort of in the landscape of financial advice or, kind of money advice in general, like if you do this, if you follow this formula, you will be, I don't know, you will have X outcome. And
Right.
what we know about human beings is that they are the wild card and that there are so many permutations of like what that outcome will be if someone were to follow that path and that's it's simply not as simple as follow this formula and be wealthy or follow this formula and be financially well. So I love that there's some individualization in this too, and that there's a practical lean to it. Like let's, now that we've identified some things that resonate or I've found my Enneagram and Money type, let's cozy up to some tools or some additional questions or skills that can take that the next step.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And so when we started putting it all together, our beta readers were like, cool, I love all these tools, but I also need a workbook. And so this feels like the time to call that out of like, yeah, people were literally trying to write in the manuscript of like, I want to do all the tools. Like I need a workbook format so I can set it flat, work through all 23, 23, 24. I should probably actually count them. It's been a minute since I've thought about it, but I usually land around between 20 and 25 tools in any book that I put together that's like practical.
Mhm.
And so folks were like, yep, where's the workbook? So we did make that as well for people to, maybe you do this in your own money meeting, maybe you do this with a partner. But again, hopefully giving people something that feels accessible versus
Yeah.
okay, I want you to save 3 months of your income for emergency savings. Yes, that's a great goal. But like for folks who are money avoidant, that is a big ask. And so we got to start smaller, which might be more the emotional side. Of course, that's what financial therapists focus on. So loved bringing my Enneagram passion and my financial therapy background together in this book. I think that's pretty unique to our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not another book like it, which I think makes it stand out, stand alone, just yeah, like makes it so useful for folks. So this is wonderful. It's an incredible tool. It's an incredible add to your collection. If you're a financial therapist, if you're, somebody who is on their journey to improving or increasing their financial well-being or understanding their relationship with money, this is something that can be very, very helpful. So, Khara, you are busy. I wouldn't be surprised if I heard you were writing another book now. But where can people go if they want to learn more about you, your work, your many books that you've written? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I try as a serial entrepreneur because I definitely like to do things. I'm moving away from busy to productive, but that's a whole different conversation we could have. But everything's on my website. So that's crossweightcounselingplc.com. Most of the things I've created are now forward facing to therapists, but of course the books are all there. Podcasts like this one will be hyperlinked there. Yeah, all of the things I do, financial therapy for therapists, consultation, speaking. I do author workshops for therapists. So, like, I'm even teaching other people how to write books, which is just as fulfilling as writing my own. And so funny you kind of like alluded to, is there another book? And I've like had some ideas, but I'm not feeling any urgency to write. But I have another book publishing this year. So that was written last year. It's my anti-hustle year, and everyone's like, Khara, we don't believe you because they're still seeing things produced. But those are just delayed. It's called publishing, and publishing takes forever.
That's fantastic. And spoken like a true three, if I may
Yeah.
say so.
Yes, you're allowed to say that. I've outed myself all about it. Yep.
Well, we will look forward to seeing that new book emerge. I know I could definitely use a little bit of, yeah, maybe a reflective moment on anti-hustle. And I loved the framing of like busy to productive and sort of how are we defining those things and where is the
Mhm.
sort of line between. Maybe there's a blend there somewhere that
Yes.
feels like the right fit. But this has been so wonderful. Thank you for sharing with us more about this book, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.